Welcome to the next session.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the session around how to drive marketing success in a pandemic with better performance management. I'm Caitlin with Allocadia, and I'm so excited to introduce you to your speaker today, Zoe Marquardt, who is the Marketing Planning and Operations Manager at Autodesk. Zoe began her career as a business analyst and consultant and has spent the last couple of years being hugely successful, helping companies like NI, formerly National Instruments, Silvercar, and now Autodesk, better utilize technology on the marketing side to support business objectives. With that, Zoe, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Caitlin. So today we're going to talk about Autodesk's journey to marketing performance management. Like many companies, Autodesk had the trifecta of pain points, which we'll go over pretty briefly, but really describe, how they impacted Autodesk specifically. And then we'll move on to kind of the goal of implementing this MPM program, which was alignment and unity to drive success in marketing. And then on to really kind of the end results, or the results we're already seeing today, which is that we can measure what was previously intangible. So our trifecta of pain points. So, at Autodesk, we have experts in channel marketing and regional marketing and industry marketing, so many different experts that naturally, without a strong MPM program in place, they diverged into silos. This also leads to poor tracking of marketing spend, because of course, if you don't have a centralized program to track marketing spend, then really it's just, finance tracking spend as finance spend, without enriching, campaign details, program goals, all of the information you would need in order to track the performance against that spend, which is, of course, bullet number 3. So we have these 3 fairly typical bullet points of pain points, all interrelated. And what Autodesk chose to do was to tackle all 3 at once. Because again, they're all interrelated, right? Without kind of breaking down those silos, you can't get to a point where you're tracking spend in a unified way across campaigns. Without breaking down those silos, you can't even develop, unified campaigns across the company. So Autodesk was not afraid of this challenge, and it, leapt head on into this new MPM world. And that is what I'm going to discuss in this next section, where we talk about the alignment and unity, really, that we've driven with the MPM program. So 4 goals that we've had, and we have achieved to some extent. Of course, we're always looking to improve and build upon these goals. More visibility into marketing tactics and their performance. So tactics being kind of that, sort of basic level of execution. We have more visibility into them today because we have a universal view into marketing tactics. We have visibility into their performance precisely because we're able to connect them with campaigns, and then that performance again with campaigns tied to the tactics. So there's that kind of reciprocal relationship there. And then more also, as in we have different angles we can view these tactics from. And then we have, different audiences we can present these different views of tactic performance to, given the flexibility of the Allocadia platform. We have a quarterly planning process now with a steering level review to ensure alignment. So, it's one thing to be able to track your tactics and their performance. It's another thing to be able to then, return to those individuals who are setting strategy at a higher level to say, does this make sense? This appears to be, doing well, but is it really in line with our business objectives? So we do that on a quarterly basis, again, with steering team. And what really sets us up for success in that meeting and those quarterly check-ins is really to have already defined the expectations for our next quarter's execution and spend. So, even as we're closing out a quarter, we'll start to look forward into the next quarter and say, do we expect execution and investment for this campaign to increase or decrease, and why? That makes it a lot easier for steering then to come in and say, okay, yes, these decisions that you've already made relative to the previous quarter's execution and investment make sense with our strategy and the performance we saw in the previous quarter. So it's really kind of like a 1-2 check there. And of course, we need to be able to validate if our expectations are met after executing. So like I said, this process involves having steering and then marketing managers really define what they expect to see. And then, of course, we're measuring what actually happens, how tactics actually perform, if a campaign is reaching the audience it was intended to reach or a different audience. All of those are interesting data points, which are important, when we're trying to say, are we meeting our expectations relative? Are we actually performing to our expectations, performing well, or getting meeting or exceeding the numbers you expected for a quarter is one thing, but another thing is to really understand why you're doing well. And of course, to do that, you have to understand your audiences, your campaigns, and everything that's kind of in that intersection when you're actually executing marketing strategy. So in these regular check-ins, and then also on a regular basis, many marketers go to this view, which is a marketing performance summary. It's kind of that quintessential image of MPM at Autodesk at this point, because it's this entry point right into the MPM program and marketing execution that would have been impossible a year ago. It was unthinkable. And so on your left, you have the plan spend by campaign rollup. And so this is, your spend that you're tracking in Allocadia by campaign. And since marketers are in Allocadia, entering their plan and then applying the campaign, that's probably not surprising that we can produce a view like that. But what is really interesting, and I think notable in a good way, is that if you click into anything on the right in the demand generation performance, or even like the pipeline, all of those outcomes are also attributable to campaigns and attributable to the spend that drove them. So that view on the left again. So uniting all of this is like that Allocadia platform, and that a marketer is going into Allocadia and they're entering their plan for a quarter, both, what I'm going to do for what campaign, and then how much I'm going to spend. And then in the next slide, you'll see, right, that information that they've entered on that one tactic and that one ID then carries through to their execution and results and actuals that are then pumped back in to feed this dashboard summary. So we really do have this holistic view, holistic in the sense that it covers marketing at Autodesk, and then holistic in the sense that it covers kind of that beginning to end process when a marketer is planning and then seeing the results and then adapting performance from there, of course. So what enables the view that I just showed you and the multiple other dashboard views related to it and underneath it? It's this framework that we have here. So Allocadia is a central component. We create tactics. So, a paid media execution, a webcast, any sort of live or digital marketing execution. We create those in Allocadia. And then a portion of those are synced to Salesforce, depending on kind of what type of activity it is. And if it is a Salesforce activity, then it could go on to Marketo. If it's not Salesforce, if it's purely like paid social, paid media, it would go through, an internal process, and then out to the various vendors that we use. So Google AdWords, LinkedIn, et cetera. But at the end of the day, then, since all of this activity is originating in Allocadia, it all has an Allocadia ID. And so really, we just need to get everything back into our data lake and then into Power BI, and we're able to see that full picture. So it's not at all really a linear process. It's kind of like a spider web, sort of limbs going out. But as long as we can, connect everything to an Allocadia ID, we can get it back into a cohesive view in the end. And that's really where, our analytics team comes in and produces these, really comprehensive and deep reports based on the data that we've provided and tagged with this, unique ID. So I've talked a little bit about, our process with the steering team and with marketers and setting expectations for the next quarter, even as they're closing out the current quarter. And about the analytics that really enable them to make those determinations. And also, of course, underneath it all, the platform view, in which Allocadia is very prominent. But what actually have we been able to do, like tangibly speaking, with these deliverables, which in and of themselves are great, but it doesn't show exactly, how much progress we've made. So this is, I'd say, the progress view, the answer to that question, which is in FY 20, so actually, which is 2019 for most people, we had strategic realization goals. This is something that Autodesk has done for a long time, and those strategic realization goals have been translated down into marketing and sales goals, respectively. But it was really sort of up to each team to create campaigns and then track the spend and the performance of those campaigns against those goals. So of course, if it's up to each team, 38% is actually pretty good. But with an MPM program and with Allocadia, we have 100%. If something is in Allocadia, it is tied to a strategic realization goal. And from there, the rest of it takes care of itself. Likewise, by centralizing the planning process, we have fewer campaigns and campaigns that are exclusively related to strategic realization. This makes it much easier for marketers to house kind of the activities and to understand where there are gaps. Because they have, the campaigns that need to be supported in order to achieve strategic realization goals. And their job as marketers then is to develop tactics that support and prolong the success of those campaigns. So we did end up seeing fewer campaigns because they have to be tied to strategic realization goals, and then even fewer tactics or activities because of this consolidation effort and because we're doing things more purposefully and having broken down some of these silos, wherever there was redundancy, that redundancy was now very apparent and you could get rid of it. We didn't have visibility into spend. This isn't to say that, every marketer was unaware of how much they were spending. No, most marketers knew how much they were spending, but there was not a universal picture of spend. Across the board, if you were to ask how much was marketing spending on X campaign or Y campaign, it wasn't a comprehensive answer. Now we can say confidently that there's 86% of the marketing spend on customer-facing activities is tracked and is therefore aligned to the strategic realization goals that I mentioned at the top there. Of course, we're still working on this, but just in order to get Allocadia and the MPM off the ground, we had to standardize on taxonomy. And honestly, that's been a little bit of a pain point. Again, because Autodesk is such a large organization and marketing is one part of it. So we're really looking to our colleagues in other areas at this point to help inform our taxonomy and stabilize it a bit. Because of course, we're doing very specific marketing activities, but we are working alongside and with, sales, finance, pretty much every organization within Autodesk. So we're now not just looking to have consistent terminology and taxonomy within marketing. We're really looking to have consistent terminology across Autodesk. And we'll be able to do that now because we've implemented and have really picked up this MPM program. So on a final note, I wanted to mention, the title of this presentation does talk about the pandemic and how we've responded to it at Autodesk. So Autodesk has a very, very deliberate customer focus and sense of social responsibility. And when the pandemic hit, it was clear that every, resources needed to be spent in order to support very small businesses and customers in industries hard hit, and even employees, workers in industries that were hard hit who aren't customers but who might be out of a job for a period of time. Autodesk launched a substantial set of resources and programs to help support people in need during the pandemic. All of this involved marketing, right? It's the same sort of tools and channels and audiences that marketing looks at, but with a very, very different purpose. And, in this context, we saw an opportunity for Allocadia because we are looking at, our spend and our performance in terms of these campaigns with targeted objectives. It doesn't matter if the objective is to support a very small business or to make sure that a worker in architecture industry or a builder has the resources they need to get back into the job market once there's opportunities for them. Those are just different objectives. So in Allocadia, we were able to define programs specific to COVID that allowed us to coordinate our marketing efforts to support these different groups of people, and then take out the performance of these programs, which can't be measured to any sort of pipeline generating or any other sort of revenue driving program because they're just qualitatively different. Allocadia allowed us to measure these separately and at the same time have a coordinated response. So we can say, what has marketing done in response to COVID, and we can show our leaders the emails and the other marketing activities and the spend, all to support customers, but not for typical marketing purposes, not with the goal of pipeline in line. And so this was something that we hadn't, of course, predicted we would need to do in the context of an MPM program. It was something that we wouldn't have been able to do. We would have been caught totally flat-footed had we not had the MPM program in place. And going forward, if we do have other circumstances like this, I'm really encouraged that we'll be able to rise to the occasion because of MPM and because of Allocadia.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zoe. I think that for everyone on the line, we can agree the pandemic caught everyone blindsided us, I guess is a better way to put it. And I know that just knowing that you have that agility and adaptability within your system now that you have this structured MPM program in place, I know that's what most of us are looking for, is how do we adapt to the unseen? And so it's great to hear what you guys are doing. And also just great to hear that there's still progress to be made. I think a lot of folks worry sometimes of well, what's my final goal? And the reality is with anything for performance related, there's always a next step. It's just a matter of getting those foundations in place so that you can start to play around with what does success look like in your own business. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone on the line. And thank you so much for sharing your story. This has been fantastic. Everyone in the chat box, I know there's been questions rolling in. We'll continue to answer them for the next, I believe, 10 minutes that we'll still have this open. So please do get your questions in there. And thanks so much for joining us today.